Good morning, grade 7 students. So for our most essential learning competency today, you need to describe the components of a scientific investigation. Please remember these important reminders. First, use the chat box in asking and answering questions. Second, use appropriate words in the chat box. And lastly, prepare your pen, paper, and learning module with you to take down notes. Now, let's have a nerve-cracking activity. You will be watching a video clip of a riddle and I want you to solve it. I will let you watch the riddle twice and right after that, I will give you 30 seconds to solve it. Please make sure to watch thoroughly.
Two young ladies were enjoying a meal together at a restaurant. They both ordered iced tea to drink. One of them was really thirsty and managed to gulp down 5 glasses of tea, while her not-so-parched friend drank only 1 glass. Tragically, the young woman who had been slowly nursing her one drink died, but her friend was just fine. The investigators found poison in all the drinks that had been served. How is it possible that the girl who drank more survived? Once again, two young ladies were enjoying a meal together at a restaurant. They both ordered iced tea to drink. One of them was really thirsty and managed to gulp down 5 glasses of tea, while her not-so-parched friend drank only 1 glass. Tragically, the young woman who had been slowly nursing her one drink died, but her friend was just fine. The investigators found poison in all the drinks that had been served. How is it possible that the girl who drank more survived?
Time's up. So the question is, how is it possible that the lady who drank 5 glasses of iced tea survived, and the other lady who drank 1 glass died? So for the answer,
The poison was actually in the ice. The ice in the tea of the woman who had been drinking fast didn't have time to melt. But the ice cubes in the other lady's drink had plenty of time to melt and release the poison into her tea. Case closed.
so what process did you use to answer the riddle? Correct! It is through investigation. Now, if you investigate to solve the riddle, what do you think is the process that we use in science to solve problems? Correct! We have the scientific investigation. As one have mentioned, scientific method is a process in solving problems. What is the first step in scientific method? That is identifying the problem. What method are you going to use to identify the problem? It is through observation. We have 2 ways to gather information. Those are observation and inference. What are the difference between observation and inference? When we say observation, we gather information using our senses. How many senses do we have? Correct. We have 5 senses. So what are those senses? We have the sense of sight, we have the sense of hearing, sense of smell, sense of touch, sense of taste. Those are the 5 senses that we have. What are the corresponding parts of the body for each senses? For the sense of sight, we have our eyes. For the sense of hearing, we have our ears. for the sense of smelling, we have our nose, tasting for the tongue, and touching for our skin. If we gather information using our senses is known as observation, how about inference? How do we gather information using inference? Right. In inference, we gather information using our past experiences or prior knowledge. Again, the two ways to gather information is through observation and inference. The difference between the two, when we say observation, that is gathering information using the senses. And when we say inference, it is gathering information using our prior knowledge or past experiences. Going back to observation, there are two categories of observation. That is the qualitative observation and the quantitative observation. Now, let's identify the difference between the two. For the qualitative observation, from the word quality, it refers to the physical attributes using our five senses. For example, the colors, shapes, texture of objects are under qualitative observation. And for the quantitative observation, from the word quantity, it is associated with numbers or values that can be counted. These values are made with instruments such as rulers, balances, beakers, graduated cylinders, and etc. As you can see on the screen, we have two ways to gather information, which are the observation and inference. And under observation, we have two types such as qualitative and quantitative observation. Now, based on the riddle that we have watched, let's identify the things that we have observed. And let's identify its category, whether it is under qualitative or quantitative observation. For the qualitative observation, we have gathered these things. First is the taste of the iced tea. That is under qualitative because that is under the sense of taste. Kind of poison. It is also under qualitative because it is something to do with the sense of maybe the sense of smell or the sense of taste or even the sense of sight and the sense of touch. How about the melted ice cubes? We have the melted ice cubes because melted ice cubes can be seen and even touched. So, regarding quantitative observation, we have the amount of iced tea, amount of melted ice, and the time spent in drinking the iced tea. So as you can see, we have the words amount and time, which gives a value that can be counted. That's why it is under quantitative observation. Now, what is the problem in the riddle? Because in the first method of the scientific investigation, we need to identify the problem. So, what is the problem in the riddle? Correct. So the problem here is, how is it possible that the lady who drank 5 glasses of iced tea survived, while the lady who drank 1 glass died? Second method, formulating hypothesis. Now, what do we mean by formulating hypothesis? Formulating hypothesis is an educated guess based on the information gathered, or prediction. In formulating hypothesis, we will be giving a prior answer to our problem. Answer based on our prediction or educated guess based on the data that we have gathered. So the problem here is, how is it possible that the lady who drank 5 glasses of iced tea survived, while the lady who drank 1 glass died? So for our hypothesis, or for our educated guess, maybe the poison was in the ice. So it melted too much and spread in the iced tea of the girl who have died. Third method, we have the testing hypothesis. Of course, if we already have the hypothesis, we need to test it. So for testing hypothesis, it is a test or procedure used to see if your hypothesis is right or wrong. In testing hypothesis, you need the variables to proceed to the experimentation. You cannot experiment without variables. But first, what do you mean by variables? Variables are factors that affects the experiment. It can be controlled, changed, or measured. What are these three types of variables? We have the independent variable, dependent variable, and the controlled variable. Now, what do you mean by independent variable? These are factors that are set by the researcher to be the cause. They are also referred to as the treatment and are usually manipulated and modified. How about dependent variable? When we say dependent variable, these are factors that are the effects of the treatment introduced to the experiment. These are observed and measured. Lastly, we have the controlled variable. When we say controlled variable, it is also known as the constant variable, meaning does not change, unchanging during an experiment. Now, let's identify the variables such as the independent, dependent, and controlled variables in the riddle that we have watched. So, let's use the table presented to identify the variables in the riddle. Now, what do you think is the independent variable? As you can see, or as we defined independent variable a while ago, it is the cause for the dependent variable to change. So, our independent variable is the amount of melted ice in the iced tea. Now, let's see the independent variable. What do you think is our independent variable? It is the effect of iced tea with poisoned ice to the body. Let's connect or let's relate if the dependent variables really depends in the independent variable. Thus, the effect of iced tea with poisoned ice to the body depends on the amount of melted ice in the iced tea? If your answer is yes, then our variables are correct. Now, let's proceed to the controlled variable. What do you think is the controlled variable? Okay, we have two controlled variables here. We have the iced tea and the poison. Now, because the mixture of the iced tea and the poison is just the same on all the drinks that they have drunk, that's why the iced tea and the poison are under the controlled variable. Next is the fourth method of the scientific investigation, which is the analyzing data. Analyzing data, it is conducted to identify the relationships among the data using critical thinking and based on the experiment performed. So what is the analysis in our riddle? The poison was actually in the ice. The ice in the tea of the woman who had been drinking fast didn't have time to melt. But the ice cubes in the other lady's drink had plenty of time to melt and release the poison into her tea. So that is our analysis. And the fifth method is drawing conclusion. It justifies whether the hypothesis is right and wrong. Now, going back to the hypothesis that we have formulated a while ago, which is that maybe the poison was in the ice, so it melted too much and spread in the iced tea of the girl who have died. Let's identify now if the hypothesis that we have formulated a while ago is right or wrong. So, right after the testing of the hypothesis, we have concluded that the poison was in the ice, so it melted too much and spread in the iced tea of the girl who have died. So our hypothesis is right. And right after that, we have the sixth method. It is giving recommendation. So what is the purpose of giving recommendations? It can be used in researches and studies that is associated with these topics. So, going back to the scientific investigation, what is the first step in scientific investigation? We have the identifying the problem. If we already identified the problem, what would be the next step? That is the formulating hypothesis. When we already formulated our hypothesis, what to do next? Let's test the hypothesis. Right after testing the hypothesis, what is the step that is used to identify the relationship of the data gathered? It is analyzing data. So right after you analyze the data, what is the next step that justify if the hypothesis is right or wrong? That is drawing conclusion. And right after you have drawn the conclusion, what to do next? Lastly is the giving recommendation. What is the purpose of giving recommendation again? It can be used to associate in related researches and studies.
For the last time, the scientific investigation starts with identifying the problem, formulating the hypothesis, testing the hypothesis, analyzing data, drawing conclusion, and giving recommendations.
And for your follow-up, please do answer the assigned weekly activities on your learning packet. Thank you and keep safe, everyone. Goodbye!
Dahil sa COVID-19 pandemic, napilitan tayong magbago ng paraan ng pamumuhay. Ika nga nila, New Normal. At maging sa edukasyon, kailangan na nating sumulong patungo sa New Normal. Ang pamahalaang lungsod ng Valenzuela ay gumawa ng hakbang upang matiyak ang tuloy-tuloy na pagkatuto ng bawat kabataang Valenzuelano. Sa pakikipagtulungan sa department classroom, ngayon ay tablet o smartphone na lang ang magiging kaharap nila. Lahat ng leksyon ay ituturo ng mga guro sa pamamagitan ng video streaming na maaaring mapanood ng kanilang mga estudyante sa kanilang mga gadgets. Ang Valenzuela School of Mathematics and Science o VALMASAI ay gagamitin bilang off-site classroom. Dito ay sasagawa ng mga guro ang live streaming ng mga klase. Mayroong mga IT technician at moderator na magiging kaagapin ng mga guro para sa mas epektibong online classes. Magkakaroon din ng virtual communities kung saan pwedeng magsagawa ng follow-up discussions ang mga guro at estudyante gamit ang free online platforms na hindi nangangailangan ng mobile data subscription. Maaari rin ditong gumawa ng group chats ang mga magulang kung saan pwede silang mag-usap at magtulungan upang maging mas epektibo ang pag-aaral ng kanilang mga anak. Assessment. Ang mga estudyante ay kailangang bumuo ng portfolio kung saan ilalagay ang lahat ng ginawa nilang pagsasanay na susuri sa kanilang mga natutunan. Ang portfolio na ito ang pagbabasihan ng kanilang magiging grado. Ang pagbibigay ng marka o grado ay ibabatay sa panuntunan na ilalabas ng DepEd. Ngayong New Normal, walang kabataang Valenzuelano ang maiiwan. Kaya tayo na Valenzuela, magbalik eskwela na sa tulong ng Valenzuela Live.